The paradox of port productivity or port operations has, of course, a lot to do with utilization of the terminals. So we, of course, as carriers have an interest in well-utilized terminals, but if terminals are too much utilized, of course, operation gets slow, and there has to be a fair balance in the middle. So as carrier, we perceive that productivity is decreasing beyond certain thresholds, which are different by individual terminal. And as such, we sometimes have a lower desirable productivity or a lower desirable utilization of a terminal than a terminal operator himself, who usually tend to prefer a higher utilization. Yeah, Hamburg Süd does not really operate own terminals. We are shareholder of one terminal in Brazil. We have as our business footprint invested into vessels and containers, and have ensured that we have a high ratio of own equipment on that. And we have a conservative owner who had always an interest to have a company which is debt-free, which is difficult to run in an investment-heavy business. And as such, we have not invested into container terminals. Hamburg Süd and other carriers have introduced much bigger vessels in South America. These were not the biggest vessels, but the vessel size increased massively. It doubled or tripled or even quadrupulated over in the last years. And as such, of course, the carriers put a high pressure on the terminal operators to increase productivity, because at the end, the berthing windows do not get really much longer. They are the same berthing windows, but you need more move count in the same berthing windows. And terminals in both South America East Coast and South America West Coast, and also in Central America, have been very, very successful in doing so. Not in every single port, but in average, the productivity has increased higher than, for example, in Europe, where you started at a let's say, a higher base level, but the increase has been much less. There are a lot of challenges of cascading bigger vessels. First of all, bigger vessels are not only draft restricted, but they're often also beam restricted. So if you imagine, for example, a container terminal, which is typical for South America, which has a berth length of 600 meters or pier length of 600 meters. So these are traditionally two berths. But of course, if you put an overlong vessel in, it really reduces down to one berth at the end. If you have vessels which have, for example, night navigation restrictions, they have to be operated in the same way as other vessels, but absorb much more capacity, and as such they cause congestion without really contributing to additional volume. Yes, there are various possibilities how carriers and terminals can work better together. In the past, carriers and terminals worked as sort of islands with a few information bridges, for example, EDI messages such as public files working together. But of course, that is a very limited information share, and it's usually only in the last minute of when you really need an information. So it waits as long as the information is so matured, and then you send it. So what we work towards with terminal operators is, first of all, to have a much better and closer understanding of each other on a cultural level, on a personal level, so that we know what the other one exactly needs, that we work through the optimization potential, looking into the details of the processes, and see how we can bring them together to optimize, first of all. So this is a big number of nitty-gritty work one has to go through. So starting at stow planning, at cut-offs, and going into details of EDI messages, what exactly is to be transferred in terms of information, and when, how the process is. But it's a very, very valuable process. At the end, of course, it's about supply chain optimization, and it can and should reach out to all supply chain partners. I think from the own experience of a carrier, I can say, of course, that the carrier and the terminal operator are sort of, it worked, as I mentioned, traditionally as islands, and it's a certain barrier to overcome. So let's say the initiative has to come from the one side or the other side, or ideally from both sides. And then further supply chain partners can be embedded in the process. It's difficult if the initiative comes from the outside. So if it's, let's say, a pressure only which comes from the shipper, because there's too much lack of knowledge what's all happening in the middle there. So it's better if first the core is being worked on, and then it's extended to the part and it extended to the supply chain partners. But there is certainly a lot of potential there in both directions to have other partners embedded in that process. We are certainly convinced that digitization will revolutionize the way of how we do shipping nowadays. So we will probably see other entities involved. We will see other ways of cooperation in that. And what we also see, and the example of the cyber attack is only one example, that one really is at the very beginning of the process. So it's, first of all, I think we are in a pioneer stage at the moment, where you pioneer on individual projects, go ahead with them, but they are not yet very mature. They are in a very initial stage. And of course, you have with that all sorts of challenges. So what the outside doesn't see, of course, there are internal process challenges. It's not embedded in other processes. First of all, you have typical development problems, but also externally, you have the cyber attacks. And all of this, of course, has to be taken care of. It's not only the security aspects, but a lot of aspects which are all to be taken care of as a typical process of being sort of pioneers, or being in a pioneer status at the moment of moving the industry forward.